Very, very happy to introduce our guest for today. So our guest is Abby Covert. Abby joined us back in 2023 to talk about her previous book, Stuck Diagrams Help, which is still a great resource if you're looking to if you're stuck with a sense-making problem, about how a diagram can help your way out of it. Of course, she's also very well known for her first book, How to Make Sense of Any Mess. But what we're here to talk about today is Abby's brand new book, which is called Timeless Sense Making for Modern Sense Makers. If you haven't got a copy of the book, it's available both in hard copy, although Abby tells me she's running out of hard copies, but I'm sure there'll be more. Also available as a PDF download. Really encourage you to go out and buy that one after today if you haven't already. And today's going to give you a bit of a taster of what's in the book and how useful and thought-provoking it is. If you haven't come across Abby before, Abby's an information architect, writer, and a community organizer who specialises in helping people make the unclear clear. In 2020, Abby left her corporate career as an information architect to focus on independent publishing and community building. So, as she was telling us before, she publishes all her books herself. Since 2020, she's launched Make Sensemas, which is an annual storytelling event celebrating sense makers, and she's founded the Sensemakers Club, and we will talk a little bit about the Sensemakers Club later in the conversation. Abby lives and writes from the other Melbourne, Florida, where her most important job title is mum, or mom, depending on where you're from. Um, we would spell that with an M, with a U, sorry, M-U-M.
Yes, I
So I'm going to leave the slides up because I'm going to be showing some pages from the book, and getting Abby to sort of talk us through some of the concepts in the book, and also asking people to share their own, how that resonates with their own experiences. But just to start with, Abby, I'd love you to give a bit of background on the book. I'm interested in why you wrote this book now, where it sort of fits in with the rest of your work. And I'm particularly interested in the word timeless in the title.
Mm.
Now seems to be a time when everybody is very interested in new and shiny things. And it feels like it might have been a deliberate choice on your part to write a book about timeless things. So yeah,
Maybe.
talk us through that. Give us a bit of background on the book.
Yes. Well, first, thank you so much for having me and for having me back. That means a lot. So yeah, why did I write this book? It really came down once again. I think all three of my books have been from the same place of wanting to teach people something that I see as an obvious gap. So in 2025, I spent the whole year teaching a master's level program through the Sensemakers Club, where I did a like a mastermind group of students who were signed up for the whole year, as well as drop-in tickets for students to do these monthly workshops. And we covered everything that there is under the like information architecture sun, from dealing with stakeholders to doing audits, to proposing taxonomies, thinking about ontologies, writing controlled vocabularies. Like we really ran the gamut. And every session, I thought, gosh, I hope I'm prepared to answer their technical questions. And I hope that my like timeliness is up to snuff in terms of what they need, because they're going to be asking hard questions about tooling and hard questions about how this applies to AI and how this applies to all the most modern, tech stack things. And 12 months, regardless of how technical the topic was, the thing that people needed to talk about in those sessions was people every single time. Every single time. It was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I know how to write a controlled vocabulary, but like, how do you get somebody to read the controlled vocabulary? Or like, yeah, 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 yeah. No, that makes sense. Like taxonomies, I get that. But like, what happens when you have two stakeholders and they don't agree on what the taxonomy should be? And you're the one that's in charge of like breaking the tie. What do you do? And so these really hard people problems kept coming up. And I really started to think like, gosh, the most useful things that I'm seeing people like run to their notebook to like write down are the strategies around dealing with people. And when I looked back at my own work, I had not covered that. Like I acknowledged the difficulty of dealing with other people, kind of ad nauseum, to be honest. Like as a, if you think about my work, it's very much like people are weird, information is weird. Like we can still deal with it, but it doesn't really get into like what do you do about the people being weird part. So I started thinking about it being kind of witchy to be good at. Like, it's sort of like at a certain point in my career, I saw it all fall away as just kind of like a game that you can sort of like have at arm's length and not let as much get on you. And I
Mm,
thought, wow, I remember when I was fresh in my career, it did not feel like that. It felt like
mm.
you were in some sort of gauntlet where everything was getting thrown at you and you had to just be like blocking and tackling and like picking up skills. But there was a certain point in my career where like, yeah, I wish that there was more of like a spell book for how
Mm,
to kind of captivate an audience about something boring like changing a taxonomy. And so yeah, I started to gather up like the most useful advice from teaching that year at the club. And when I put it all together, I was like, this is all really timeless wisdom. Like I could think about people using this hundreds of years ago and it would still apply. And I would hope that I can think of like hundreds of years in the future and this might still apply. So yeah, even in the age of AI, I think that there's certain things about the way that we perceive other people, their incentives, their intentions, and how that relates to us and the work that we get done. That's just, yeah, there is a timelessness to it. And you're right, the shininess just makes me crazy.
mm.
So yes, this was a little bit of a an answer to
Yeah,
um, yeah, the shininess.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the idea of it being a spell book is really interesting, and you'll even see that as we show some of the pages, you'll see that reflected in
Mhm.
some of the visual design, the font choices, and lovely little stars and things that are sprinkled through the book. But I think one of the things, just touching on something you just sort of said, one of the things that I really got from the book overall, regardless of the individual parts of it, is just that sense that, or that reassurance that we're very good at seeing where the messes are, and it's not always the right time to fix an individual mess, and it's also we also can't fix them all at once. And certain things have to kind of line up. Certain things around incentives, and then situations have to sort of line up for it to actually be the right time. And if we're feeling like we're butting our heads against a brick wall, that's not necessarily an us problem. Sometimes it's just not the right time. So
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 Great. So I just wanted to show the contents just so you can get a bit of a flavour. Everyone can get a bit of a flavour of what's in the book. So you can see that a lot of it is very very people focused. So the book starts off talking about approaches that we can take as sense makers when we're dealing with stakeholders. It talks about specific sense making practices and when they might and might not sort of be a good idea, or when they work, what situations they're good for. It talks about incentives, so understanding the incentives people have and how we can make a case for our sort of work that fits those matches those incentives. And it talks about the return. Um, Return on investment is a really important sort of part of the conversation we have to have with people. It talks about making a structural argument for change, why talking about why an organisation should do something, and then it finishes with a game. So, as I said, we're gonna touch on some of those, not all of them, but some of those segments of the book. But I'd love you to talk about the game, Abby. So, why did you why did you decide to finish the book with a game? And I'm also just
Mhm.
interested in the game in practice. Like,
Oh my
are
gosh.
people are
Yeah.
people playing it? How does it go? How does it work?
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so fun. I've gotten to test it with quite a few people now, and it's really fun. The reason that I ended with a game is because I think that at the end of the day, the book is encouraging you to work on your discernment. And I think that It's very difficult to work on our discernment exclusively at times when we are being compensated for the decisions that we're making. And so there's like a playfulness that is very difficult to manufacture in a classroom environment for people to practice discernment. And so one of the things I started to experiment with during that year-long experiment of teaching every month was using time in my workshop with students to do randomization of narrative. So I'd have like a case study, and I'd be like, if we roll the dice and it says this, we're going to go in this way. And if it rolls the dice and it goes like this, we're going to go in this way. And then we're going to decide what to do. And people really gravitated towards those mechanisms. It really opened people up that hadn't been talking actively in class that were other formats. I got real commentary out of them. Like they would say, like, "Oh man, this is a decision I've faced in the past." And so that comparison of narrative became really powerful. And so the more I used case studies in my teaching, the more I thought about like their power in my past books has been as like examples where people are looking for like inspiration of like, making a better diagram or a story of using information architecture to make sense of your mess. But when you're working on a book about discernment, you kind of have to put the reader into the story. And so the game is really putting the reader into the story. And so it's a game of random chaos. You pick a context up front. There's three or four that are suggested. The dragon adoption portal seems to be the most popular at this point, but you can also work on a haunted house ticketing system or an interplanetary moving system. Um, so you get assigned this context, and then you have to develop these stakeholders. Each stakeholder has its own background, its own incentives. And so you work all that out as yourself or with a team. You can play it either way. And then you go into the game, which is rolling dice, moving through an actual board. And as you move, different things happen to you. So in some cases, you have a change on what your return on investment strategy is. In that particular one, your CEO comes back from a conference and your return on investment strategy is 100% different overnight based on their direction. And so your team then has to kind of think through and talk through what would that mean. There's other times on the board where you get asked to diagram your way out of a specific problem. There's other times where you have to spontaneously make an argument. So yeah, it's kind of like taking all of the lessons of the book and then introducing this chaotic aspect and this playfulness where people, because it's this fictional, made up kind of sci-fi-ish context, people can sort of remove themselves and just play the characters. And what I found in practice is that people are using this as an opportunity to play their best and worst stakeholders and to sort
Mm,
of like heal those experiences a little bit. I know that that sounds a little woo-woo, but I got to be in a room with about 25 people that were playing this in person, teams of four. And it was really interesting at the end how many of them told me that like they had invented like a nasty little troll character that really was like their boss three bosses ago. And that talking through with their team these imagined scenarios really helped them to see like what their part of it was and
mm,
kind of like started to help open them up about keeping their side of the street clean. So yeah, the game has really been very magical to watch people
wonderful.
find. So yeah, highly
Yeah.
recommend. Get some friends together and get nerdy.
We may have to look for for an opportunity to organize a game session.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
I just tested at our Sensemaker salon at the club last month. Tested the digital version of the game, which I
Mm,
haven't released more widely yet. But
mm,
that version is a little bit like speedier because it
mm.
creates the context and the characters for you, and then you
Ah,
just jump right into the gameplay, which has also been an interesting kind of like a quick hit as opposed to like
mm,
the more full arc.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we'll look forward to that one.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, so we're gonna go and talk about some of the individual sections of the book, and I'm aware that we're dealing with the issue of trying to display a portrait format on a landscape screen, but I think on pitch I can actually, can I? No, it's not letting me. I thought I could click and expand things, but anyway, hopefully it's good enough quality that you can actually stretch your window a bit. But yeah, it's not important that you read that you read. Anyway, it's really all about getting a sense of what's in the book. Um, if you have, we would really love. everyone to participate. So if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, feel free to just use the chat. But if you do feel comfortable, we would love you to put your hand up and ask your question or make your comment out loud. Um, so so the first section of the book is around approaches to stakeholder management, and you specifically talk about these approaches as a set of masks that we can put on as sense makers. So Abby, maybe if you maybe want to talk about a couple of them. Don't
Yeah.
Probably don't have time to go through all of them, but maybe talk about a couple of them and talk about why you think of them as masks specifically, rather than something. I mean, some people might look at this and think, oh, that's a list of personality types or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so why does the word masks kind of appeal to you? And yeah, so maybe
Yeah.
if we start with that.
Okay. So yeah, the word mask, I'll start there. The word mask is very purposeful. I have been recently diagnosed with autism, and masking is a concept that, as a neurodivergent person, I have been introduced to in the last, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of my life. And I realized at a certain point while writing this book that masking is actually, well, it is a coping mechanism, and not always a healthy one. It is also one of my greatest superpowers as a sense maker. It is the reason that I have been able to stand behind the word any in my first book title, Any Mess, because I truly do believe that I have the bravery and the clarity to stand in front of a mess and try to make sense of it. But that requires me to take different forms where working with other people, one thing that I have noticed is that many people have a tendency to keep in the same form, regardless of who they're interacting with or the context that they're interacting in. And I've even been told that that is authenticity. But what I have learned in terms of like managing my own neurodivergence is that that's not necessarily authenticity. That's actually like a lack of boundaries, and a lack of emotional intelligence to know what other people need in order to feel comfortable enough to open up to you as a sense maker. So when we're making sense with other people and for other people, it's really important that we build trust. And if we're always going in with the same approach with everyone, regardless, it can start to feel like we are complacent, combative, annoying, uh, persistent in all of the worst ways. And so yeah, some of the examples that I like to pull out of this list of eight is the educator. That's the one that I think many sense makers get themselves stuck in, where they feel like they have to do this constant sales job of
Mm,
educating people on what the practice is and what it's called and what the pieces of it are. And like that is not actually always the best state to kind of approach people with. Sometimes it makes a lot more sense to go in and be like an embedded partner and do a lot more listening and figuring out like what's going on behind the scenes so that you can use your educator really tactfully and tactically. And so, yeah, the educator is one that I see people getting stuck in. The documentarian is another one that I see kind of doing people a disservice just because I think like you could make the mistake as a knowledge worker of thinking that that is your job to be the documentarian. In reality, a lot of the crap that happens in these systems actually doesn't need to be documented at the time. It needs to be discussed, it needs to be facilitated through, it needs to be strategized, it needs to be like shitty mapped, as my friend Joe Elmendorf would say. But no, it doesn't necessarily need to be documented in the way we think about like documentation. But if we try to force everything into documentation, we will be frustrated. And so, yeah, that's why I talked not only about putting masks on, but also the ability to take them off and realize
mm,
that like the educator is just a mask. That is not all of you. That is not the authentic you. That actually is a mask that you've been hiding behind, because it's the
mm,
one that you think that you need to wear to justify your job title or your position or your salary, whatever it is. So I find people using certain masks as shields, and then other ones are like just something that they would not ever want to put on in a million years. And that generally is a place that people could see a lot of growth if they would dare to, take off the one that they're really used to and put on another one every once in a while. Yeah. like the
Yep.
incrementalist. That's probably the hardest one for people in knowledge management jobs to take on is like, what would it mean to actually think incrementally instead of
Mm.
thinking about the white whale all the time? And so, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Mm.
But we have to build the system. It has to be a whole. Yeah, it has to be a whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to hear from people in the chat. Which of these masks, um, on obviously a first impression, which one do you think is the one that you go to the most? And which is the one that maybe pushes you, makes you a bit scared, or potentially puts you outside of your comfort zone, as Abby just talked about. I think for myself, I definitely see myself as a challenger. That's one that really
Mhm.
resonated with me. The idea of going in and finding where the problems are, or whether where people's grand ideas are going to fall apart.
Yeah.
And I do feel relatively comfortable being a challenger, but it's not always. This is definitely one that's not always the right role
Yeah.
to fill, especially when you're new. I think new in a context and you don't understand people's kind of emotional connection to the status
Mhm.
quo, even though you can see the status quo is bad. Yeah, it's very easy to make people feel like you're you're just there to criticize.
Yeah,
So
you're a
yeah,
jerk.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I find that one, the challenger costs trust. Like
Mm,
in order to challenge folks, you are kind of dipping into the trust bank. And
mm,
if you don't have anything in the trust bank and you make
mm,
that credit, it doesn't work.
yeah,
It's like, whoops, we've
yeah,
taken too much. So yeah.
yeah. And Dan says he most often goes to the facilitator. Um, yeah,
Mhm.
a bias for trying to surface assumptions and incentives and build alignment early. That would be the one that puts me out of my comfort zone. I, um, I would I
Okay.
would say anything that potentially raises conflict, but sometimes well, actually, I'm wondering. Sometimes you go in play putting on one mask and then realize midstream that you actually need to put on another one because you're going in. I've definitely had the experience of going into a workshop or something like that, assuming that it's all just going to be a fairly neutral conversation,
Yeah.
and then it turns out that there are two teams there that absolutely hate each other, and the
Mhm.
really important work of the workshop is to
Yeah.
find some common ground between those two teams.
Yeah, you thought you were going in as like a documentarian to like
Yeah,
figure
yeah,
out like just tell me about the thing, and then you
yeah,
find out like, oh, I actually have to
yeah,
go into facilitator mode to even
yeah,
get these people to
yeah,
talk to each other.
yeah.
But that's part of
Especially,
it. That's
yeah,
the discernment, like
yeah,
knowing when
yeah,
and where to and with who to wear
yeah,
what and for how long,
yeah,
and to not get stuck. I think that the
yeah.
the getting stuck is really that's a big challenge.
Especially with taxonomy work, I find strangely because taxonomy
Yeah.
seems like it's going to be dry. It never is
It
because
never is. It
it's
never, ever,
about
ever is.
yeah,
No.
it's about people's mental models, and it's what's important in a taxonomy is seen to reflect what's important to the organisation. So yeah,
Mm.
of course that brings conflict. Great, yeah. So we've got Freya says trying to be more of an embedded partner, but often finds herself as a coalition builder.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and Dan says seeing them all together on a page makes you realise how familiar they all are. Um, but yeah, so that's my, and obviously in the book you talk a lot more in detail about each one of those and
Mhm.
when are the right situations to put those masks on, and when are they maybe not so helpful. But that's kind of one piece of the puzzle, and one of the good things about the book for me is the way that it's a book that makes sense of sense making. It's a sort of a meta sense making book, really, isn't it? So all of these little sort of taxonomies that you develop in the book are all kind of connected together. So you have your list of approaches here or masks, and then in the next part of the book you talk about specific practices that you've kind of found helpful over the years, in specific situations, and they go with specific masks. So
Mm.
I pulled out. after having just said I see myself as a challenger a lot of the time, I just pulled out the one that is specifically for challengers, which is the
Yeah.
anti-persona activity. So I really love this is one that as soon as I read it, I thought, what a fantastic idea, and it's not something we ever do. Talk us through
Mm.
what is it? What are anti-personas about, and why what are they good for?
Yeah. Yeah, anti-personas, I would say, are the best de-scoping user research tool that I can
Mm,
recommend. The idea is that when you feel as if your scope is ever expanding to just collect different use cases, different audiences, different tasks, whatever it is, that at some point you put a stake in the ground and you say, okay, these folks are who we are designing for. And these folks are who we are not designing for. So, some
mm,
useful uses of anti-personas that I have seen have regarded things like technology. So saying, for example, that you are not going to prioritize desktop users, that you've
mm,
looked at the data and it's not worth your business priority on desktop users. So you're just not going to do it. That is something like a really simple form of an anti-persona. I've also seen them like fully developed out to where they look exactly like a persona, but it's like who you are not designing for, including like a full research cycle. So I think
mm,
the concept has range in terms of ways that it's executed, but the idea of having a stake in the ground of who you are not designing for is surprisingly freeing for a team. It's like
mm,
a white flag that people can wave at times where it feels like too much has been added, and they can say, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! What do we think about Annie, the anti-user here? How does that fit in here?" And it's one of those ways that you can create as a challenger, you can create an object that allows other people to be a challenger without putting their own reputation and like opinions as the thing that everybody's basing things on. It sort of like lends that trust that you've built to other people in the organization. So I find it to be, yeah, a really powerful potential tool.
do you ever find there's resistance to this activity from
Yeah.
organizations who think their audience is everyone?
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
of
yeah.
course. Everybody thinks that their audience is everyone. That's why this is a powerful
Mm.
exercise. Because if you get people to start to say out loud that their audience is everyone, you can very strategically pick off sections that you just know that they're going to say, okay, that's not. All right, that's not, okay, you're right. Though that particular group, you're right. And next thing you know, you're talking about like a fairly large group of people that you're eliminating, and then you are getting closer to the mark. And sometimes that's an easier conversation to facilitate than the conversation about who you're designing for. It's like, okay,
Mm,
you guys think it's for everybody. Let's start whittling it down because it surely
mm,
ain't everyone. So,
mm,
yeah.
mm. Yeah, yeah. One of the I think it's um, connected to one of the things that we sometimes do in content strategy, which is developing a what we call a proposition, which is
Hmm.
this is what this tool does and doesn't do. So I could see the anti-persona being a really useful sort of ingredient in that
Hmm.
proposition. Particularly with government work because
Yeah.
government uh, websites in particular tend to go in with the assumption that they're serving absolutely everybody and that they need to include every piece of information that could ever be relevant to anyone. And yes, it can be actually whittling down the scope can be sort of half the challenge.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Just sort of picking back up on Emma's comment about the masks. So Emma sees herself as a serial documentarian, which can be a superpower, but often have to pull back when you realize it's not always helpful beyond a certain point. I think yeah, the documentarian. I mean, every documentarian has that experience of producing a absolutely beautiful artifact that just gets never nobody ever reads. And
Right.
yeah,
Heartbreak.
it's
Heartbreak.
it is.
Yeah.
And Emma
That
also
only
said,
feels good for a few minutes. I mean, like, I think that
yeah,
that's something it is important in a room full of potential documentarian heavy folks to say that out loud. Like,
mm,
that is a energetic waste
mm,
that over the course of your career will deplete you.
mm,
Because you
yeah,
can only do that so many times with your energy to
yeah,
not feel like you're not appreciated.
mm,
When that same energy could be refocused into other activities
mm,
um, to get better effect and to create more clear opportunities for you to shine as a documentarian. when you
mm,
finally are needed in that role.
mm. And yes, and Swapnil, who is a technical writer, says story of my life. Yeah, it's probably technical writers are more pigeonholed into the documentarian mask, probably more than anyone else out there,
Totally.
I would say. Yeah. Dan, would you like to take yourself off mute and talk about your comments? So Dan talks about a modified five whys approach when stakeholders
Mhm.
say the audience is everyone. I'm just interested in hearing a bit more about
Yeah, I
that.
would love to as well.
Yeah,
I love the five whys.
yeah. If you're not familiar with five whys, you just ask. It's a method to just asking why, and to uncover the root cause of something. So, but why? But why did they do that? And they tell you why, and then you just drill down into the root cause of what the problem is. So, similarly with like I use the core model approach in a lot of workshops in the past, and one of the technique that's the technique I used in that core model approach was to say, who is the user? Oh, it's like local councils. Okay, who at the local council? Oh, finance. Okay, who in finance? Oh,
Mhm.
probably the administrative officer. Okay, what does the administrative officer do every day? Like when do they engage with this? Oh, actually, it's not the administrative officer. In that case, it would be such and such. So you drill,
Mm,
so they start wide. Oh, it's councils or who at the council. You drill down to get the actual person, and then you
mm,
uncover what is the needs of that person in that role for this piece of content or task or what have you.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think any parents in the audience will appreciate this. They call that the toddler why.
yeah,
It's just it's
yeah,
like you have to, as a business person, you have to figure out a way to be a
yeah,
non-annoying version of that. But it's
mm,
essentially what
yeah,
kids are really good at doing, which is just
mm.
asking the why behind the why behind the why, because it turns out that three or four
yeah,
whys in is actually where the truth is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
yeah. But drilling down, yeah, and drilling, it's almost like the five who's, Dan,
Mhm.
or the yeah,
yeah,
the mixture of who's and whys. But yeah, drilling down to the actual person is so important, isn't it?
mm,
Because so often when we say our audience is Fortune 500 companies, or our audience is
mm,
our audience is something sort of abstract, then,
yeah,
then we end up designing for the wrong actual person, because it's the person. We're
Mhm.
always talking to a person. We're never talking to a company. We're
yeah,
never talking to
yeah,
Yeah.
an
and that
entity.
might,
Yeah.
yeah, that might work for a market. Like what market are you in? Like your broader
Mm,
business. But like when you're talking about a piece of content or like a subsite or
mm,
you know a particular task, then that has to be drilled down to the individual
mm,
or individuals.
mm.
Mhm.
Yeah. And yes, and often we're talking to a person who has to convince the person who's actually rating our stuff is a person who has to convince someone else. We're not talking directly to that person, or a person, yeah,
Yeah.
person who's standing in for someone else in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I now want to move on and talk about incentives, and we've sort of touched on this a little bit, but again, one of your main points in the book is that unless we understand unless we understand the incentives of the people we're working with, our work isn't really going to hit the mark. So yeah, can you talk us through that a little bit, Abby? And I'm also interested in why you use the word architecture specifically, talking
Mhm.
about incentive architecture as opposed to
Yeah.
just incentives. What sort of makes it an architecture for you?
Yeah. No, I think the reason that I use the architecture is it's a little cheeky, I suppose, because it's always precarious. Like
Mm,
at the start of this chapter, I talk about how building on top of a stack of incentives is like building on top of a stack of river rocks that you've stacked to be gently
mm,
positioned on top of one another, and now you're expecting to like build a skyscraper on top of it.
mm,
And so yeah, I think that like it really is that precarious is
mm,
sort of the point that I'm trying to make with the idea of bringing architecture into it, because I don't think it's actually the understanding of a single person or a single stakeholder or even a single group or organization's incentive. It's actually about the stacking of everyone who's involved, including you, and everyone's incentives that really equals the environment that you're building in. And that is deeply impactful on the architectural approaches that you can actually use. So when I'm talking about incentive, what I'm really speaking about is what are people putting on the line and like what are they getting as a result potentially. So like
mm,
what are the outcomes that they're looking for? What is the risk that they're taking? And then what is the level of ownership that they actually have? And the combination of those three things, understanding those three things for every stakeholder that's in the mix is incredibly powerful. It kind of makes you that witchy person in the center that's able to choose the right mask and choose the right approach and facilitate through the chaos once you
mm.
have that understanding of folks.
Fantastic. I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into risk, if you don't mind, because risk is one that I feel like if there's one that's ever present at the moment, it's risk with the whole sort of AI conversation, and especially the conversations that content people are having with stakeholders, because they're very aware of the risk of, oh, if we launch a chatbot, then there's a risk that it will give people wrong information. But at the same time, there's a risk in doing nothing, because even if we pretend AI doesn't exist, Google is displaying AI summaries that are using our content, and they may get it wrong. So there's also a big risk in doing nothing. And my sort of observation of organizations is that they're good at thinking, well, a lot of them are good at thinking about the risks of doing something, but very bad about thinking of the risks of the status quo. So you do a
Absolutely.
risk assessment of a new initiative, and that can be a great process to go through. But organisations don't do risk assessment, never do a risk assessment of doing nothing.
Yeah,
And often the risk of doing nothing is actually the biggest risk of all. So, yeah, I
absolutely.
don't know. Do you have thoughts about how to sort of lead people through thinking about risk in that kind of balanced way?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like one of the things that I learned from my consulting career was that asking people about what they are scared of
Mm,
is the most powerful way to future-proof your work in pretty much any context. Because they're basically telling you the future that could happen if you don't do something that's different than the status quo. Right? Like your understanding of that status quo is actually like a really important material that you can then work with when you understand what they're afraid of, because that is often coming from either their past experience in the organization or the past experience they're bringing into the organization. And both of those things are super impactful on things like how they're going to comment on your first proposal in front of a large group, or whether or not they're going to stand behind you when you have to answer a tough question from a higher up stakeholder than the two of you. All of that comes down to like whether or not they're willing to take that risk, which I think has a lot to do with trust again. So by asking people what they're scared of, and what keeps them up at night, if you will,
mm,
you're saying that you are potentially a safe person to put that with. And
mm,
people are often looking for places to put that. That is a psychic weight that many people are carrying about the projects that they're being brought into. And it is not actually often that people ask them those questions, especially when they're isolated from the group. When you have somebody one on one and you ask them a question like that's the kind of
mm,
thing that makes somebody like take off their glasses and rub their eyes, or like lean back and go, oh boy, do I have a story to tell you. And so that's I think like back to the toddler why. That's when the real stuff comes out, is when you're talking about what they are putting on the line by trusting you with whatever it is you're
mm,
about to lead them through. So yeah, I
mm,
think understanding risk is one of the harder ones to get at, because you need to make people comfortable enough to
mm,
actually ask them about that. I
mm,
suggest in my stakeholder interviewing framework, which is in a prior book, that's in the 10th anniversary of How to Make Sense of Any Mess. In there, I talk about how if you're going to get into the doubt area of an interview, it's best to put it kind of late stage, sort of like third in line of like you've already
mm,
kind of established the person and their position. You understand sort of like the hopes and dreams and all that before you get into the darkness with them, because there is an existential avoidance that stakeholders can introduce that sort of introduces this wall,
mm,
and there's information behind that wall that you need
mm.
for later on. So yeah, asking like, what's the risk
Yeah,
of doing this? What's the risk of not doing this? I think that's a fabulous question to
yeah,
add.
yeah. Yeah, and also understanding the emotional weight behind a risk,
Yeah,
rather than just like putting it in a nice, neat little risk assessment where you've got your risks and then you've got your mitigations, and it's all
yeah.
it's kind of abstract. It's like, no, this is actually,
It's
it's
not
actually about
often that
yeah,
abstract.
yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah,
sometimes the risk is like, I might not get a bonus if this doesn't
mm,
work. That's
mm,
a real impact on somebody's behavior, on how much tolerance they're going to have for ambiguity along the way,
mm,
how like rat in a cage energy they're going to be as you get into some tougher spots. Like that's really important stuff to know. If you find that out halfway through the project, it's going to feel like the rug is pulled out from underneath you. And it's going to be one of those like all of the things are falling into place. And you're like, oh, that's why that person was such a jerk in that one meeting where I proposed we put this off by 6 months, even though that
mm,
makes total sense in all other ways. Why were
mm,
they being so hard about that? I had no
mm,
idea that they were getting a bonus if it was shipped in three. That
mm,
would have been very crucial information, but they're not going
mm,
to offer that to you. I think that that's also a really important part of the architecture part is like you have to be thoughtful and intentional in the
mm,
way that you would study for constructing an actual architecture.
mm,
Because at the end of the day, you are the one that's going to be sort of like dealing with the connective tissue of how all
mm,
of this creates some sort of a foundation that's going to be solid enough that you can build something on it.
mm,
Which, if that sounds scary, it is. That's a lot of, yeah,
mm.
that's a lot of witchiness.
So these lessons all feel very hard won, Abby. So I'm wondering
Yeah.
if you have an example maybe from earlier in your career of a time where something went wrong because you didn't understand people's incentives.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Can I please tell you? I'm going to tell you the most stressed out I've ever been as a sense maker. I'm going to tell you about the time that a website I worked on was taken down because no one told us that we were going to be featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Does everybody in this room know who Oprah Winfrey is? I can't even believe
I
I'm
think
asking
that's I
this
think it's a
question, but I
safe
think
bet.
that that's zeitgeist now, right? Okay, so there was this. I worked on the Kentucky Fried Chicken was the business, and I was at an ad agency at the time, and we worked on just like a little advert mini microsite thing, and it was for a grilled chicken bucket. And it was a real rage moment. It was like a diet culture to the max kind of thing. But it was very timely at that moment. It was built in Flash. So that's the era that we're talking about here. And no one told us. We never talked about how big it might get. We never talked with the client about how much they were putting into it in terms of like, were they working with their PR agency on anything? And ultimately, there was a complete breach of communication and their PR agency got them featured on the Oprah Winfrey show. And it was one of her like favorite things. And so it just went absolutely nuts viral. And it took the site down within moments. And then it became this huge rash of backlash because the promise was that we were giving away free chicken to anybody that came to this website. So it was a huge lesson to me in like having blinders on because the
Mm,
site itself would have performed well if it just had like a standard amount of traffic for that brand. But adding in the Oprah Winfrey factor definitely changed things. So ever since then, I have always like given this the Oprah test.
mm,
All of my work since that moment has gone through the Oprah test. It's like I ask the people who are in charge of security, the people that are in charge of performance, and the people that are in charge of PR, like what would happen if this went on the Oprah Winfrey like podcast or whatever the equivalent is of the medium today. And if they don't have a real like solid, we know what would happen and we have a plan for that, it's not ready. It's not ready for prime time. Even if it's like a little thing that like you wouldn't think that Oprah would ever get a hold of. It's important to like yeah, know the risk that you are taking.
you never know with Oprah. She's
You never
it's
know.
very wide ranging.
Yeah, it's a good problem to
Yeah,
have, but it's a
yeah, yeah,
problem.
yeah. I think you've
Yeah.
just given everyone chills, Abby. So everyone's now
I'm
going
so
to go out and
sorry. I'm
add
so
the
sorry. Yeah.
Oprah because we can all think of equivalents of what would happen if this website or this piece of content got mentioned on breakfast
Yeah.
TV or or got mentioned in a speech by Pauline Hanson or something like that.
Yeah, like we can all
Sorry, that's
hope
an
and
Australian
wish.
reference. Yeah.
That's all right.
Um, Wonderful. So I do. So we're getting close to time. It's been a fantastic chat, and I'm sure everyone is going to rush out and buy the book and delve into more of that wisdom. Um, I just want to have a chat about the another one of your initiatives, which is the Sensemakers Club. So this is, I guess, what you're doing with most of your days at the moment, Abby. So talk a bit about this. What it is, why you started it, how it
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started the Sensemakers Club because I was intellectually lonely. I felt like I was at the middle part of my life and at the senior level of my career. And I had a lot of network contacts. Like, a lot of people will like comment on my LinkedIn post or like, reply to a group email that I send out to a list. But when it came to actually like making connections with folks, I really felt like I was lacking in that space. So when I left corporate employment in 2020, I started to take these one-on-ones with random people on the internet that wanted my advice. And so I had these free office hours sessions, and I did one a week. I eventually started calling those people sense makers. And all of them shared the intellectual loneliness that I had. It was like people wanted people that weren't judging them in terms of their actual job to talk about their work with, and they wanted a place that they could like bring problems with stakeholders or bosses or colleagues that weren't related to the network that they had made through their jobs, which is remarkably hard to find. Is like all of the people that you're connected to, you used to work with or you currently work with, or you met that one time at a conference and you guys hit it off like a house, and you'll never see them again. And unless one of you is real brave and makes a digital coffee invite, you're never going to cross paths. So after doing that one-on-one for a while, I started Make Sensemas, which was bringing all of those people together and saying like, hey, what it would be like if we like once a year told each other stories of like real messes that we were in and real things that we made sense of. And the feedback from the first year of that was, oh my gosh, do we have to wait another year? So I started doing a monthly, and that was talking about information architecture. And I just had folks come through that were students of my e-courses. And it just kept being the feedback that like, oh man, the people that come to this are so cool. I wish I could like talk to them more than just once a month. But I couldn't do it more than once a month. Like I'm only one person. So I didn't want it to be like, this is going to eat up all my time. So I decided to write out to my mailing list and ask, does anybody else want to run like a small group discussion once a month? And I had like almost 100 people say, yeah, I would love to do that. And here's the topic I want to do. So I went through all of those proposals and I paired up people into pairs of on a topic. And then I set them loose on a schedule. And now we have had I don't know, 500 and something discussions. We've trained 75 people to lead small, inclusive discussions where we like to say that the hosts hold space instead of fill it. And these are discussions, like they have a very loose prompt at the start. And then whoever's there and whatever happens, happens. They're not recorded, so it's not like
Mm.
a meetup where you have to like catch up on what you missed. Yeah, it's every day, so it's at 2 p.m. Eastern, which I know isn't the best time for you all,
No,
but
it's one.
we do have a few members in inconvenient time zones, I would say, and I've heard that they treat it like an early morning gym membership, is how
Mm.
I've heard it talked about.
Yes, it's definitely one for the night owls if you're in Australia. But I know we
Yeah,
have people who come here from other places as well.
yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. If this is something that sounds like might be for you, maybe you change your schedule to accommodate it. So
I
yeah,
am constantly having conversations about the potential to expand into other time zones. So
yeah,
as soon
yeah,
as there is a enough of like a market swell idea to do it, or a
yeah.
host, hint, hint,
Mm.
let me know. Yeah, because this is we're growing it as a cooperative. So
Mm,
it's not meant to be a capitalist structure or endeavor. It's currently under my own like ownership purely because it's not yet a profitable business.
mm.
And so the membership is meant to sustain itself and then grow its own paid staff approach. And we're slowly getting towards all of our goals. So yeah, if we get to everything we're trying to do, we'll be profitable by the end of the year, and we should have a membership just over about 200 people. So
Amazing.
yeah.
So yeah, definitely check it out, people, but don't go to the Sense Markers Club, which is what I put up there.
Ooh, yeah, not that.
The Sense Makers Club. Yeah, the Sense Markers Club is something totally different. So you don't want to be a part of.
I really want
Um,
to know what that is, though.
So
Thank you.
how could I be part of it then if it's not the Sensemakers Club?
Sensemakersclub.com.
Sensemakers Club is the right URL. I just there's just a typo there, Luke. So yeah.
I see.
Yeah. The link that Emma's put in the chat is the correct one. Wonderful. So thank you so much, Abby. That's been really wonderful. I think we've all just been like sitting back and absorbing the wisdom, really. But as I say, you will get a lot. You will get a lot from the book, and it's a book that I can see myself just like dipping into, which I think is what the way you've designed it, dipping into whenever I think about what's the right way, what's the right approach to actually solve this kind of sense making problem. What mask do I want to wear? What kinds of stakeholders am I dealing with? What are their incentives? And what are some of the amazing fun activities that I might like to run. So yeah, highly recommended, and thank you very much for being a guest, Abby. Please come back again. You don't even need to publish another book.
Anytime. Yes, no, this is
Yeah.
really this is awesome, and you're a very thoughtful interviewer, Angus. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. So just before we finish, and apologies again for the late start, and yeah, the little Zoom glitch, which I'm definitely attributing to Zoom, not to myself. I don't know what happened with the link there, but glad we all got here eventually, and yeah, it's been a fabulous session, hasn't it? So just a bit of time for announcements. If you have anything that you would like to share with the community, please just put it in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to something you'd like to talk about out loud. Just a few announcements from us. We are planning a lightning talk session. We think now it will probably be September. We haven't locked in the date for that yet, but if you have something you'd like to talk about, if you sort of have something you'd like to share, but you don't feel like you have enough for a full session, or you don't want to do a big long talk, this is your chance to do that. To just do a little 10-minute spiel about something you've been working on that might be innovative or interesting or unexpected, or just an idea that you have that you'd like to share with the group. Please fill in the form at that URL that Emma's just posted in the chat, or just get in touch with one of us. We have, as you know, at Weave, we do content design training, training the courses that were developed by Content Design London. So we have all 3 of those courses available over the next few months. So a good time if you need to spend some training budget before the end of the financial year. A good time to do that now. We also have the early bird pricing for all of those courses still available, so you can see the details at our website. Please check out our YouTube channel where you can find videos of our past talks with the wonderful Tori Popojerski and Carrie Hayne there taking pride of place. And basically all our talks for the past couple of years are up there. And our next meetup is going to be a bit of a homegrown one. So we're going to have Emma, who's here, and also McGee, who couldn't be here today because she's in transit, having done some training in Brisbane. McGee and Emma will be talking about a big project that they worked on for a state government, where they developed a whole of government content design system, which is just as exciting and interesting and massive sense-making exercise as it sounds. So yeah, that's been a talk that's been delivered in a couple of other places already and very, very well received. So I look forward to that one, and that will be announced. We'll hit the announce on that straight after today. And that's it. So did anyone have any announcements? Looks like we've got a few in. Oh no, that's just Emma posting links. Emma, did you see any announcements from anyone else, or just last chance if anyone
No, I
wants to
don't
put their
think
hand up?
so.
Great.
Just lots of
Okay.
thank yous.
Well, thanks again, everyone, for coming, and thanks so much again to Abby. It's been a great hour, and we will definitely check out the book, check out the Sensemakers Club, and we will see you next month.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much, everyone.
Bye.